What's up, YouTube, and welcome back for part 19 of the STI build. I've recorded this in 4K and hopefully it's looking a lot better. Probably doesn't make me look a lot better. In this episode I got a bunch of smaller modification stuff that I need to get done, including this air box. It's meant to separate, you know, the air cleaner, air filter from the rest of the engine bay. And now that the intercooler piping is in place, this is not going to sit in there as it did. So this side of it needs a lot of trimming. I mean a lot of trimming, just to be able to use the rest of it. And then probably even the lid, the top part of it, will have to be trimmed as well. So I plan on doing that, and I'm going to move on to the wastegate. Hopefully get the wastegate installed, and then I really need to go through some emissions and vacuum lines and start actually finalizing what's left on the engine. The rad hoses still aren't installed, the belts still aren't installed. For the majority of the engine's actually done, but there's just a few things that I left at the time that need to be finished up. So I'm just going to kind of whip through a lot of stuff here and show you the results of what I'm doing. So I've just started to make some cuts on that air box, and I started to fit what Tyler had on here for an air intake. And well, it's kind of obvious, but it's not going to really work anymore, or the way that it did anyway. The intercooler piping is just completely in the way of the air filter actually mounting. So I've got an idea to do a turn down on this. But the other issue is, so Perrin provides two of these couplers, or I don't know if they added another one in the box, but I think this is a 3-inch pipe and we need to go down to 2.5 or 2 3/4. So they provide this adapter to do so. Well, this end is so large, I mean I can just get it into the end of the turbo inlet, but it is so tight that I can't forcibly get it in far enough to put a clamp on. This end goes in perfectly on this pipe. And then I just checked the other piece that they give you, which is just the straight up 3-inch to go to 3-inch to 3-inch. And it does go into the pipe. And then, so I was like, well, what's going on here? And you can see that's how much space I actually need. Like, that's how this pipe is just that much bigger than this one, that I can't get it to go into the turbo inlet. So ideally I would just weld these together, but the last time I checked, you can't weld aluminum to steel. I guess because I don't really want to wait for something that might be able to adapt one size to the other, I'm gonna JB weld this. So yeah, I don't know. This GoPro might be going back. The Wi-Fi doesn't work on it for some reason. I've tried a bunch of things. I even looked on GoPro's site to figure out why it's not working. Just it doesn't work. And I mean, that's what you get when you buy a refurb. Anyway, so I've kind of figured out what I'm gonna do with the intake. Plan to let it sit kind of like this, angled down. So I just cut the end off this silicone coupler, this kind of S-bended silicone coupler from Cobb, because I just can't see you making it fit any other way. I mean, it's tight in there as it is. So the air box will not be going back in. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work in there. And I mean, you could cut the whole back side off of it and kind of modify the front, but it's just going to leak, and what good is it going to do? You're better off trying to build something more custom. So I kind of moved on to emissions. I've got the AOS installed. It's pretty much right against that pipe. It's really close. I've even readjusted the pipe to try and get it a little better, but I mean, it fits tight in a few places. But I need to install this catch can, and it mounts in here somewhere. Not that I couldn't custom mount it if I wanted, but I've really got to figure out the hose routing, because even the valve cover vents are still not hooked up, and the whole AOS is not hooked up, the crank vent's not hooked up, none of the ports on the turbo inlet are hooked up yet, so I got a bunch of that stuff to do, and I've just got to kind of figure out how I'm going to end up routing it, so make sure the system's going to end up pulling everything through the catch can properly. So that might take me a little while. So I dug out the instructions for the oil catch can, and there's only one thing written in English on the entire instruction and installation sheet. This product is designed for use in Japan only. It must not be used in any other country. So I guess that's what they really intended, because unless you know how to read Japanese, you just go by the pictures and kind of like, I think I know what this means. There's actually a really bad storm out right now, like the rain's pounding down, the wind's really high. Just hoping that no more trees go down, I lose power again. But I think I'm kind of finished here for the night. I'm going to have to start again in the morning. Because I'm waiting for JB Weld to set, and I actually had to buy some more JB Weld to finish that, I pushed on to the catch can. So the catch can is supposed to mount right down in here, but the intercooler pipe is definitely going to be in the way, and it can't be used there. So I made up a little S bracket and fastened the catch can bracket to it, and it's pretty sturdy. I mean, it doesn't really have to do anything. It's allowed to wiggle around a little bit as long as it doesn't come loose. I don't really like this hose, and everyone knows it to be cheap hose, but this stuff is probably actually qualified for the use. But Tyler may want to change that up later, but I'm using it now because it's what I have. And I've done some major rerouting of the AOS. Whatever oil's building up should make its way down the air oil separator first, and if it bypasses that, it's going to have to go through the catch can. So yeah, I'll just continue on tomorrow morning. I've got to get some more JB Weld. I've got to get some more small clamps. I've actually run out of clamps, and then anything else I can think of I can grab while I'm out, and then I can just continue on. So it's the following morning. I've already been out. I've gotten clamps. I got some JB Weld. I got some really quick setting JB Weld. The stuff that I had last night, I was able to at least get the first portion of the two pieces of that the air intake coupler that I'm kind of getting together. So I'm pretty sure it's going to work absolutely fine. It's going to be JB welded, which is kind of ghetto. So I have just continued on. I've installed some more clamps. I've got some more hose routed. I started working on like the evap emission stuff and getting some of the boost control solenoid and the boost sensor all kind of laid into place. It's really tight, really messy. But the way you have to understand, first we'll go over the AOS, the air oil separator. So both of the valve covers have hoses coming up on either side, and basically those two hoses get teed together and make their way onto one of the lower sides of the AOS. The other low side of the AOS, because you see it's got 3 ports, but 2 of them are lower than this upper one. The other lower one will go to your crankcase vent. So basically we're venting everything to the 2 lower ports on the AOS, and then the top port on the AOS loops back over to the bottom port of the catch can, so that any residual oil that makes its way in will fall down inside the can, and the can is constantly being pulled under a slight vacuum from the intake manifold, or the inlet, the turbo inlet I should say. So the inlet's always going to be sucking air as long as the engine's running, and always causing a little bit of draw on this hose. Now the clear hose, I mean, it looks kind of strange, and but I've talked to Tyler. We're going to leave it on for the first couple oil changes. We want to see if anything's going to gather in this thing, and I would expect it'll probably pool down in this corner if there's any residual oil coming through, and there always might be. It's just we're looking for excessive oil. The evap solenoids, there's 2 evap solenoids, and I really can't get into how they're plumbed. because one plumbs into the other and they both go into the actual evap line coming from the fuel tank. It's a little bit much to go over and how it's routed. And the other thing, I got it all kind of jammed in there because I eliminated the top plate just to kind of so you could see the intake manifold a little better. So the Grimmspeed electronic boost control solenoid, it's now off that bracket and it's fastened directly to the intake manifold, and I just kind of got the boost sensor kind of zip tied to it to retain it. So that's the only little blue hose that you see. Might change that out later to a black. So I've got one side of the solenoid already, the hose routed over to the turbo for boost, and this hose will have to be extended. I'm going to have to get ready to install the wastegate and then probably extend that one other hose so that it's long enough to actually go down to the wastegate. So I've got the car jacked up, sitting on jack stands. I'm ready to install the Turbosmart 40mm external wastegate. I've kind of got it configured. I realize how it's going to sit something like that. As it bolts up, the dump tube will kind of sweep just past the axle down this way. So I've got the ports facing straight up because the other one's kind of angled downwards. And I'm gonna set these ports the way that both Grimmspeed and Turbosmart would have the valve set up, and then if the tuner wants to change it to try and get more boost out of it, then he can make that choice and switch it up. Here you can get a good look from the bottom side. The wastegate is not easy to get in there. Just getting the V-bands tightened up is kind of challenging, and I actually had to modify the flange a little bit to make it easier to tighten up. So the down tube, very, very close to both the CV boot and the actual transmission. It's hugged right up against the exhaust to make clearance for everything else. And I tried like many different situations of repositioning the wastegate just to make sure everything was the way I could get it perfectly. So the idea is to actually extend this down later on and try and take it out to the side of the car. But it's not, I just don't have the time at this moment to do it. So it also requires that that V-band to be untightened and taken back down every time that I need to make another weld or adjustment. So next I'm still going to be working down here. I got to try and get a transmission mount in. And here's the transmission mount. It's an absolutely gorgeous piece. Perrin is written on every single piece. Even the bushings have Perrin engraved in them. So time to lower down that cross beam for the trans and get this guy in there. I've already got the transmission mount in place. In order to get it in there, you actually do have to unfasten those mounting bolts, the two horizontal bolts going through the mount, because you can't fasten those rear bolts without actually taking those other bolts out, because you just can't get a socket up on there. The studs are replaced with bolts here, and just make sure the transmission's well supported when you're changing it out. They're pretty straightforward to get in there, and I'm sure there's plenty of tutorials out there. All the Subaru mounts for the transmission are pretty much done the exact same way. Okay, so it's the following morning. It's actually this morning, and over the past couple nights I've been getting this adapter together. So it's completely JB welded, and then I primed and painted it black. It's gonna work right in here, and it's pretty much where I'm gonna end this video. So I'm gonna install this guy, probably plug in the mass airflow sensor. I've got the intake all together. That coupler worked absolutely perfect. I mean, yeah, you can kind of see a little bit of the JB weld underneath the paint there, but it's pretty much hidden in there. It's extremely sturdy. There's not even really anything mounting the air filter, it's just hard fastened everywhere. So I mean, even later on, there's a good possibility you could be able to, you know, mount a shield right to the back side of this mass airflow housing, and then kind of drop it back down to the body and make your own little shield. So having the intake together finalizes this episode. Only a few things left to do it before I crank the key. I'm gonna post that episode next week, next Sunday. I just want to make sure I go through everything and double check everything, and I got a couple small things to do. I need some better quality and vacuum line to go from the boost control solenoid down to the wastegate, and need to still wire the gauges up to the ignition, and put in the fluids, get ready to tune the car, and so the next episode, that's what it'll be based on, and hopefully crank the key and everything goes okay. So aside from having the SDI almost together, I did record almost this whole video in 4K except for these last couple parts, and I'm not sure if it's my PC or the software, but it doesn't want to render the 4K for editing. And I realize that you know, my PC's getting older, but you know, it is an i7. It's got 12 gigs of performance RAM in it. Pretty decent motherboard, even though it was bought a long time ago. And it's been great for 1080, but I guess it just doesn't, maybe it doesn't have the power for 4K. And I realized, you know, the extra space I'm going to need, and so I was able to actually render the 4K in my older program that I used to use, and kind of because I guess within the program it just auto renders it as 1080 because it's as high as it goes. And so I've been able to edit this video with that software, hopefully. I haven't encoded it yet, but hopefully. So 4K is going to be something in the future. I am planning on building another PC, but it's, you know, it's nothing in the near future. I want to get my cars all together before I do. It's going to be car parts before computer parts. And as for the camera kind of sucks. I don't know what the Wi-Fi doesn't work. It seems to kill batteries in no time at all. So I've already kind of contacted the guy that sold it online, and I'm pretty sure the camera's going back, and I'll decide whether I am getting another one or another Hero 4. Or, you know, I really don't know. I love the GoPros, and because I have all the accessories, and even the Hero 4 fits all the Hero 3 accessories, even the case. So it might even be a possibility that I just do an exchange with this person. Because it was a refurb camera, and I guess, you know, they have a pile of them. So maybe I got to get them to test one before they send it to me. But if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.